from day one when I entered, even in my first interview, I said, if my age is ever mentioned in a meeting, sort of like if my race was mentioned or anything, I would quit in a heartbeat, because I was used to being in situations where people said, Mehmet, but how old are you? Like, you're very young. And I was like, no. Talk about my work. Like, if you say you're very young, but your work is not good, no problem. We can talk. But if you're saying you're very young, but nothing about my work, then I would say that's like ageist. That's just basically like me saying to an older person, but how old are you? You're very old. You wouldn't do that. I would never say that. So I had to set that boundary.
Hello there, guys. Welcome to Caught Off Guard Season 2. My name is Patricia Bright, and it is a pleasure to be back. So today I'm really excited to introduce Akash. Hello, Akash.
Hi, Patricia. How are you?
I am doing amazing. I want to tell you a little bit about him as to why he's on our podcast today, because he's fantastic and a force to be reckoned with. He is a Forbes 30 under 30. He's a founder of his own brand, Fable and Main, and he was one of the youngest managers ever at Estee Lauder Groups. And it is a pleasure to have Akash on Caught Off Guard today. So you have been amazing at making yourself indispensable at some of these companies that you have worked at, and you've decided to move on and do your own thing. So I really want us to get into that and talk about your journey of success. But we usually start out with this series or this section called an ice shaker. So I'm going to ask you some questions that, may make you feel a little bit awkward, but I'm sure that you'll be fine with getting through these.
Let's do it.
Okay, so you're no longer working at Dior, Burberry or Estee Lauder, so you can sort of speak freely. What is the shadiest thing that has ever happened to you while working in the luxury beauty industry? You don't have to say any names.
Perfect. So I won't say any names, but the shadiest thing, I have two shadiest things. One would be people trying to fire me. For example, someone tried to plant an influencer to get dirt on me during a private kind of coffee, and then used what I said and was writing notes to then try to say I was bad-mouthing people, which I wasn't. So that was...
oh my gosh.
That was tricky when that happens. And then the other shadiest thing would be my own boss basically from day one not really supporting me or not really wanting me to grow and learn. So that was definitely from day one. She was counting my mistakes with her hand, and it was just really difficult.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to go into that a bit more, but let me carry on with the ice shaker, because I'm going to ask you about 100 questions right about now.
Probably.
Is it a high-paying industry, or do you think that people are sold on the perks? How much do people at the top actually earn, but also people in the middle?
So the disparity is quite big. I think the majority of people in luxury, when especially entering, start off quite low. And I think the job kind of growth as you grow in your role, you don't end up getting that same growth in your salary. So I always say it's better to come in at a higher level later on in the game than start very young and low in a company. So the disparity is the top management usually would have good salaries, and then it kind of is a medium at the bottom, because the perks are usually there in the name.
Is the industry, as it seems, very white and middle class?
You know what? I was in the industry for 4 or 5 years, and I would really safely say from year one to like the last year, I saw huge advancement. So I think now it would be unfair to say it is, but overall, I guess you can say there are still a lot of companies that, unfortunately, especially in the top management level, this is the case, sadly.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussions around that at the moment, but it's interesting to see where it's going to go.
Definitely.
So we've known each other for a decent amount of time, and we've met as influencers. What did you think of me when you met me the first time? And this is a nice shaker for me.
This is so funny, because when I first met you, I was obviously working with Dior, and you were the influencer. We met in China, and I had to be very professional and, kind of represent the brand. But funnily enough, you're actually someone who I used to watch on YouTube a lot growing up. So I was a bit like, fanboying, whatever you call it. But I had to be like, no, look, I'm Dior. I'm the global manager. Let's go for lunch. But actually, I was inside. I was like, oh my god. I was texting my sister, being like, you do not know who I just met. And you were probably one of the. I met many different influencers and celebrities on my journey. But you were the one I was probably the most excited for. And we get lists of like influencers that come to trips and stuff. So before I go, I know who's coming and who to expect. And you were the one I was like, oh, Patricia Bright's coming. Patricia Bright's coming. I remember.
Oh my gosh.
I shouldn't really admit that
to you. That's so crazy. Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, you've met like Bella Hadid and all these lovely celebrities.
Yeah. No, but you...
So for me... Oh, wow, I appreciate it. Is it
mainly because you just say, like, as someone who I listen to the content, you are one of the most inspirational people on the internet for me. So that's why, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I didn't know that. And I didn't put that question in there. But yeah, we've definitely broken some ice there. Okay, so I really want to get caught off guard and really delve more into your experiences and how you were able to make it as far as you had within the beauty industry so quickly, and also how you then were able to take your learnings and moving to doing your own thing. So what was it that made you want to work for brands like Burberry, Estee Lauder and Dior?
So I'm not going to lie, I think growing up, the name was always something that was quite glamorous, and the idea of luxury we often associated with like big names like Dior, Louis Vuitton, etc. So there was an initial sense of like the CV build of like having the best name and having the best kind of backing, and I think that's the main reason why. But I think as I grew older and as I started working more and more in there, that's when I started to be less attached to the name and more the work I'm doing there. But yeah, that was probably the first reason, to be honest.
And actually, I know you a little bit, and I know your background was actually engineering. So you went to Imperial College London and you studied engineering. How did you pivot from that, which is very numbers-based and mathematical, not the most glamorous industry, to then going into the beauty space? Because I don't know if you felt like that was your natural trajectory.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up, my father has been in the beauty industry for over 40 years, but mainly in the fragrance world. So I used to always like go to his meetings and ask him, like when I was 12 years old, like, can I just sit in the room and just listen in? So beauty was always something in the back of my head that was just kind of in my DNA, in my blood. But in school, I was just really quite good at math and physics. No stereotypes, but, I'm Indian. It just was my thing. And I think I just naturally came into that path of saying, well, let's merge my two strengths of maths and physics, and engineering seemed the logical step. But when I was in the degree, I really started to like feel like I was much more of a creative individual that liked numbers as opposed to a numbers individual that liked creativity. So I felt a bit lost and wasn't sure if this was the right path. And actually in my penultimate year, I ended up failing some exams. That was sort of like my wake-up call. And at that time, I'm someone who, growing up, when I didn't get 95% and above, I would like be so upset. I would like cry. I was like that nerd that everyone used to hate. So for me to like fail exams, I can admit that now. But now like failing exams at that moment was a huge wake-up call to realize now school is over, you're in the real world, and you got to do what you enjoy in life, and that's when you'll get success. So it was actually the biggest blessing, because I had job interviews at the likes of Goldman Sachs and banking, and that was my path. And then actually I ended up in that year out working at Burberry in an internship that my dad managed to get me, and that was in digital marketing, and at that time was something so new, and I was like, let's try this. I fell in love, and then I said, okay, well now I'll start my career in an industry I'm passionate about and I have an edge in, which was beauty from my father, but also in digital marketing, which I just fell in love with.
That's wild. So you did the ultimate pivot, really, because I think a lot of people get caught up in, I go to university, I do this degree, I have to do this job, and then you realize you're doing it and you're like, I'm not sure if this is the right thing for me. And I'm similar in the sense that I did accounting and finance. I like numbers, but I'm also a creative person as well, and you were able to really find that synergy in what you do and be really good at maths and numbers and business, but also be in the industry you're into. I think
that's why we're so similar. And I think actually we have an edge in this sort of creative, digital, social world by having that analytical background, because we're always coming in from a sort of business, finance route in an industry that doesn't have that many people thinking in that way. So we can hopefully pioneer it, especially in my role in the companies of Dior, etc., where it was all about influencer social media. My main stance was, how do we put some numbers and data to this? Yeah.
I love that. Data is so much power. So what was it like working in the corporate world, in the corporate beauty world? Because I think corporate beauty is different to, you know, working in finance corporate or accounting corporate, but there are similarities. Can you share us with what the day-to-day is like?
Definitely. I mean, so I worked in corporate luxury fashion a little bit with Burberry and then beauty. And although I would say they're quite similar, just luxury, fashion has certain moments with autumn, winter, spring, summer cruise. Beauty, you have a lot more campaigns throughout the year. That's the main differentiator. But in terms of like people and hierarchy and egos, it's pretty much the same. You're entering a world where there is a lot of people who've been there for 30, 40 years, and there are a lot of new people that have come just for the name. And there are some in-between people who are just in these companies, but they don't even fit the bill. You're like, oh, the average person just coming in and working in analytics in Dior, but he is not a Dior person. So
Sure.
There was a lot of different variety in these companies. And I think working in that was quite comforting to know that, especially in digital, which is such a new type of industry, I had a lot of different personalities that I could eventually find my niche. And like kind of like school, you have like cliques. That very much happens in big companies. You have certain types of cliques. But definitely working in corporate beauty is one of the most important things is to be really strong yourself, but still being humble. And I think that's how you win. You have to a lot of people go for this sort of like hard-edged approach of I'm confident so I don't get run over myself. And I think the wrong thing with that is a lot of people end up just not liking you. And I think that happens a lot in the industry. So I think for me, being someone who was with high positions at a younger age, and I thought initially that would bring me an advantage of being, oh, you know, he's endearing, he's young. But actually it became like a threat. Like, why is this young kid coming into the boardroom meetings with the CEO? So I had to quickly adapt and realize, okay, I can't be now condescending and like kind of belittling being so young and then speaking up, but can I use my age as an advantage and let my ability of work be the king, and then later kind of just listen and know when to speak up. So I adapted a lot in the situation to make it as manageable as possible, but it was definitely difficult at times. Definitely.
I can imagine. So was it like The Devil Wears Prada, basically? Is there the beast at the top? Well, let's not say beast, but is there someone at the top who is cracking that whip and, not making it be the nicest environment?
So, I mean, I'll give you examples working in the companies like Dior and stuff. Like the top management, my CEO was a dream. So for me, it was like not really Devil's Wears Prada, where my CEO was the most humble being and he was my mentor, like my inspiration. And that's why I stayed in the company for that long. But there were people in senior positions who you could say were like the Devil Wears Prada approach. But I think that kind of goes with any company. I wouldn't like hold it to Dior or other companies. But in general, Dior actually was pretty, like 95% of it was like so enjoyable, nothing like what you think. And you've worked with Dior as well, so you know the people internally. It's just 100%. A really beautiful family and team. And I'm not saying that now, I really mean it. But there are obviously individuals that can sometimes be difficult. Yeah.
So you mentioned obviously being quite young and being quite a senior position. And I think that's really challenging for a lot of people, that pressure to come out of university and then have a lot of responsibility straight off the bat. But there must have been a reason as to why you were given that level of responsibility, because I'm sure that your work proved over and over again that you were worth it. But how did you find that and navigate being a young person or a younger person in quite a high position, because you had access to the CEOs?
Yeah, I had to be, so my technique was from day one when I entered, even in my first interview, I said, if my age is ever mentioned in a meeting, sort of like if my race was mentioned or anything, I would quit in a heartbeat. And I said, I put that down in the table from day one, because I was used to being in situations where people said, "Mem, but how old are you? Like, you're very young." And I was like, no. Talk about my work. Like, if you say you're very young, but your work is not good, no problem. We can talk. But if you're saying you're very young, but nothing about my work, then I would say that's like ageist. That's just basically like me saying to an older person, but how old are you? You're very old. You wouldn't do that. You know, yeah. I would never say that. Yeah. So I had to set that boundary. And I think because I was one of the first, if I may say, like one of the first in the industry to be of a quite senior position when I started at 22 and then 23, managing teams of people, you know, who are older than me, I had to like find that balance between being endearing, humble and young, but also being strict with my morals and really putting the sense of the company comes first and my work comes first, not the way I execute it by my age or my being, you know, that's irrelevant. But I also made sure as well that I didn't have this overly confident approach of like, I'm young, I'm powerful. I wanted to say, I'm young, I'm here to learn, I'm here to grow. I know next year I'll be saying, oh, I've come so far. But when you talked about my day-to-day work, can I at least be appreciated for the work? And I don't want my age to be a barrier to entry to things that perhaps is not relevant to other things.
That's amazing. And I heard you put on a little bit of a French accent because you actually moved to Paris for your job role. Was that something that you knew you'd have to do, that you had planned for? I know that people deal with sometimes being told, you know, you're going to have to leave your friends and family for a career opportunity. How did you find that?
So I think it was quite fortuitous because I studied French in school, but up to GCSE. So I didn't really necessarily, I didn't speak for like 7 years after. So I've completely forgotten the language, but it wasn't like as scary as say moving to Germany or something where I didn't know the language in advance. I never had the idea of moving, but I did know I wanted a change. I thought my whole life I've lived in London, just stayed in London, traveled around the world, but haven't really experienced a new city, a new culture. And I knew the idea of luxury and corporate head offices were mainly in France or in Italy, but London, you only have really Burberry as a really major head office, but everything else is everywhere else. So for me, it was definitely a perfect opportunity. And it was sort of more the pull from Dior wanting me to come there that made it even more exciting for me to say, it's a two-way exchange. They see the value in me, I see the value in them. It seemed like a good moment to move and migrate. Even though my time at Estée Lauder wasn't finished and I had so much still more to learn, I felt maybe using this as a stepping stone is the best way for me to go even further, because I kind of felt like I wanted to go into my corporate experience as an extension of my degree. So like an MBA, but further to say, in corporate, you have this experience where people say, you got to work 3 years before you've proven yourself and you do the same thing for 3 years. And for me, that's perfect for people that want to grow in a company, stay there for a long time and pay their dues. But for me, I wanted to use it as an entrepreneurial building experience. And I knew my end goal was always to have my own businesses. So if I was here to learn, which was my path, I don't want to repeat the year. I wouldn't go to university and repeat the same exams every year, right? You graduate, you go to the next thing. Mm-hmm. So that's what I felt like that was a perfect moment for me to take the move. And then going to France, a lot more than I expected in terms of actually the language was a huge barrier to entry. I did not realize that till I moved. But everyone speaks French. Like in the office, no one speaks English. And I was shocked.
Wow. That could have been kind of isolating at points in time, but I think you show that you have a lot of strength in character when it comes to, you know, working and being professional as well. And actually, I think what you said is really valuable in regards to like the career working, even if you are entrepreneurial, is a stepping stone to where you want to go to, because you're able to learn a lot of lessons. Did you know that you wanted to work before you started launching your own businesses? And is the experience that you learned working valuable to what you do now?
Yeah, I knew I always wanted to have my business, but because I didn't have that business in a tangible idea when I graduated, I didn't want to just sit down and create a business for the sake of creating a business. I always knew from my father that successful businesses today come from an authentic story, an authentic why and need. So unless I had that coming naturally, I didn't feel comfortable just creating a business from day one. So then the logical step was, let me get some more experience, and corporate seemed the logical route. But I always knew that I could always do two things at the same time. So even if I find the idea halfway through, work on the side, build my company while still having a full-time job. I would say this though, working in corporate, I've learned a lot, and it will be silly for me to say oh, it hasn't made me who I am today, because without that experience, I don't know if I would even be where I am right now. It's all kind of, it's a path that's intertwined. But I would say the business I have right now and my hair care brand, the learning isn't really stemming from what you've done at corporate. The learning comes from the execution and just doing it. So corporate really teaches you, like university, personal skills, management skills, team skills, stress management, all this stuff. But it might not give you the actual skills to start a business. So for those who are thinking of creating their own business, that just comes from taking the leap and just doing it and just hustling and working on it. But only start that when I would say only start that when you really have an authentic story and why. Otherwise, today, especially now than ever, people can sense that, and people only want to support businesses that really have a true meaning.
Okay, so you got into Forbes 30 under 30. I want you to share with us beginning, middle, and end on how this worked and if this was a goal for you, because honestly, this is amazing. And Forbes have had a bit of their issues in the past because they were talking about Kylie Jenner being a billionaire and didn't have their facts quite right. But how did you find that process?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm always honest with everything I do. Like growing up, I'm very different to who I am right now. And I think we all grow and learn. So I did have those vanity goals and, like I did write down on a piece of paper things that I think everyone does that. Like I want to get a cover one day. I want to get Forbes 30 at 30 one day. So it was definitely something I would say that was in my mind. But I didn't actually think it would happen when I got out at 25. So I didn't plan for it or anything. Well, what happened was I was working with so many different agencies at the time. And many of them, while I was at Dior, were saying, look, like what you're working on, what you're doing is quite like entrepreneurial. Like it's very new for Dior. It's very like, like kind of building things within this company. So I started thinking, hang on, yeah, maybe I can get something like Forbes 30 to 30, even working for a big heritage company. I thought I always needed to have created my own business and made it into like $1 million business. But actually I thought you can still be a corporate employee and still be recognized and being an entrepreneur. It's called like a corporate entrepreneur, right? How you can change things within a company. So I looked at what I did and I thought that's actually potentially, that kind of works. So I actually, a few of my colleagues and my team nominated me, and then I actually just asked a few more. I said, do you mind just nominating me? Because, you need to like plan things. You can't just have one or two. Yeah. You've got to have a few, right? And then what happened was I didn't hear from them until a few weeks later. And they said, congratulations, you've been shortlisted. You get like an editor or someone that emails you. And they basically asked for a lot more data to be filled, like a huge Google Doc. And then I was worrying because I was like, oh my God, they're asking for revenue I created and this and that. And actually, like, I'm working for a company like Dior, so I'm responsible for like a slither of the company, right? It's so big, it's bigger than me. So then I just started like keeping those sections blank. And I just said, look, well, I'm not responsible for revenue driving things, but I'm responsible for a lot of different things. And here is the new things that maybe they could even start thinking about. And I didn't hear from them at all. But you send your photo and stuff before, so they have all the information you need. And then on the day when they announced it, I remember seeing like in my email and like there's been announced a list, and I just was like, oh, okay, I didn't get it clearly because they would have notified me. So I just walked to work, and then I was like, not upset, but I was a bit like, oh, okay, that didn't happen. And I just thought, let me just check who's on the list. And I went on the list and I saw my face and my name, and I was like, what? Like, well, how am I on the list? But I didn't even get told. So then I remember,
how am I on this?
It was so embarrassing, but I literally like saw it and I was like, oh my God. And I was really excited that I actually walked back home. And then I went to my room and I was like, yes. And I did a little bit of dance. And then I called my mum and my parents and then went to work. And then it basically was like, okay, then it didn't matter. Then it was like, okay, that was yesterday. No one, wow. It mattered for me, but it was interesting. Like, I don't think it was something that people in France really knew. So when I said it to the office, people were like, oh, c'est cool. But I was like, is this bigger? Is this big or is this not big? Because maybe no one cares.
I think the French are just very cool for school. They're like, you made $1 million, fine.
No, many people said, what is that? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to tell people in the office because no one cares. But that's such an achievement. Oh, thank you.
I would love to. I'm past 30 now, but Forbes 40 under 40. I could do that and be one of the youngest doing that. Okay. So you've left corporate and now you're on your own entrepreneurial journey. But I know that you also are an influencer. You've got your own following. And then I don't know if that has directly influence what your business is doing. But firstly, could you share with me more about your experience as an influencer and working with influencers? And then let's go into your journey of becoming a full-blown entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. So I will say, like, growing up, I was just super shy, and I wasn't someone who had the vision of having I think that actually scared me, like the idea of to be recognized on the internet. So it wasn't something I was planning, but during my university, being an engineer, I really needed that creative outlet, and I was always quite passionate about singing. I actually, little funny story, but when I was growing up, I was asked to be on The Voice UK in a blind audition, but I ended up going to Japan and I missed my audition, so that was sad.
That crazy.
Yeah, that was.
How did they
like,
hear you?
So I got scouted. So I went to produce around. I sang in front of them, and I went to the studios. And then they said, "Great, we'll call you back in 2-3 months and for the blind auditions." But then actually they called me, but it was a voice note when I was in Japan. It was like, "Sorry, we moved it earlier. Can you come on Thursday?" And when I came home, I was like, "Oh, I missed it," and then it was already filmed. So that was sad. But actually, it was better because. Again, I was really shy at this point, so to be on a stage or something, I was not ready for. But when I went to university, I started finding my love for singing again, and I found a producer from Sony, and I used to work on a studio with him every evening after lectures. And he told me, "Akash, you should really think about growing your social media following, because to get signed by Sony in the end, that will really have an impactful stance on it." So I basically started to record covers. I did a bit of my own advertising. I kind of did a lot of digital marketing techniques. And before I knew it, I started getting like 1 million plays on some of my songs. Some of them went viral. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
We need to find the clip. Producer, find the clip. Let's drop it in here.
But
Love
yeah.
that.
So I kind of was getting my social media following from that. And then I kind of transitioned into travel, because I used to travel a lot when I had the time. And I used to take a lot of travel, the typical influencer style shots of like me kind of looking backwards, posing with the background.
Yeah.
And some of them went a bit viral again on Instagram. So I started gaining my following. There was a turning point in my influencing career where this is something that it's maybe a bit random, but I used to get paid sometimes quite a bit. And probably you can relate to this, Patricia, with like, we started getting ads and a lot of companies coming to us. And it was always hard as an individual to decide, okay, that's not really my brand, but that's a lot of money, right? Like that's a good amount of money. So there was one actually company, a famous company, that reached out to me. And this is when I started losing a little bit of, bearing in mind I was just at S. Lauder at this time. So I started to like work in these companies. So I was a brand as well as an influencer. And I started to see like this agency that was representing the brand and talking to me said, "What's my rate?" And I said, "This is my rate, X amount." I said, I think at that time I was like, "I am about £2,000 for usage rights and everything." Mm-hmm. And then she said, No. I had a 10,000 budget for you. I'm gonna put you 10,000. And I literally at that point, I accepted it because I was like, that's a lot more money. I'll take
the 10,000.
I'll take the 10K. But after I was like, this is how the industry is not sustainable. And I think, I was the problem because I accepted it, but then you have like this inflation rate within, I think now, is that my minimum? And there's all this thing that was like, and it wasn't helped because they didn't do their vetting. So in the UK, I don't have that much following. Most of my following is US and India. So I should have said that to them and said, actually, I'm not worth that for you. And I think that's when you see today, and you see this, you're someone who is a true influencer who really has authentic reach, authentic following. I have tools at Dior that can see fake followers and that, and you are like the best by the best. But there's so many, honestly, but there's so many... There's so many influencers that are sort of like making the industry not sustainable. So I wanted to then, from my personal account, say I'm no longer doing ads because I was a business, I was working for brands, but I had a mission to do it right in these brands. And when I came to Dior, my mission was to work with the right talent that are relevant for the brand, but also have real following, real reach, and are relevant to the market. So putting again that data to the thing. So I stopped kind of caring about my own following in terms of growing it, but more about the value of it. So how can I talk to my existing people, my existing followers, and get closer to them that I perhaps didn't get to do before? And that's been my mission for the last year or two in doing all this entrepreneurial stuff. So now I would not really call myself an influencer because I haven't grown. If you look at my social blade, I'm like staying at this number, but that's okay because I'm more going for the quality right now and being closer. If I can help one person, that's all I need to do.